While the entire world has been watching tankers burn in the Strait of Hormuz, watching America and Iran trade major strikes, something else has been happening almost entirely out of the spotlight. In Gaza, in Lebanon, and across the West Bank, Israel has been steadily expanding military operations, territorial control, and settlement construction, all while the world's cameras point somewhere else. This isn't a side story. Multiple fronts are moving at once, and the time is not a coincidence anyone serious about this region is ignoring. So let's start with Gaza, because the word ceasefire here needs and clear attention. Israel and Hamas agreed to a US broke ceasefire back on October 10th, 2025. Large scale ground fighting did stop, but by the mid-July of this year, Gaza Ministry of Health was reporting that Israeli strikes had killed more than 1100 Palestinians since that ceasefire apparently took hold, with thousands more wounded. On July 14th alone, a strike on police station in Gaza City killed 6 police officers. Few days later, 8 killed and 20 injured in strike on funeral procession for Palestinians killed by Israeli earlier in that same day. Women and children have been killed repeatedly. A World Central Kitchen aid driver was killed while transporting food supplies, prompting the organization to publicly demand accountability. And territorially, Israel has been quietly expanding well past the boundary the ceasefire actually set. The agreement drew what's known as the Yellow Line, marking how much of Gaza Israeli forces were authorized to hold. Netanyahu himself, speaking at a conference in a West Bank settlement, said it plainly. Israeli forces have moved from controlling 50% of Gaza to 60%, and his directive now is 70. That's not a rounding error. That's confining Gaza 2.1 million people into less than a third of their own territory. Under a ceasefire, that was supposed to be de-escalating, not expanding the war. Now let's go north to the Lebanon, where a nearly identically pattern is playing out. A ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah has technically been in effect since November 2024, later reinforced by another round of talks by this year. And yet, Israeli strikes in southern Lebanon and Bekaa Valley have continued on a nearly weekly basis. In early July, an Israeli drone strike on a car in Nabatea killed 4 people, who Lebanese state media identified as a school principal, her mother, a domestic worker, and a Syrian national, none of them identified as combatants. Amnesty International has separately called for an investigation into earlier Israeli strike. It says killed 24 civilians. Lebanon's government has said Israeli attacks have killed more than 4,000 people since March of this year alone. Investigators at Bellingcat, using satellite imagery, found that of the 44 villages sitting within Israel's so-called Yellow Line zone in southern Lebanon, 46 have been either partially or completely destroyed. Israel's own military has been consistent about why. Officials describe the strikes as targeting Hezbollah's rearmament efforts, specifically its elite Radwan forces, calling the operation a quote, clear message to both Hezbollah and the Lebanese government. But here is the sentence that matters most for understanding this timing of all of this. When Israel and Iran reached their own halt in direct fighting back in June, Prime Minister Netanyahu stood up and explicitly said that ceasefire with Iran will not apply to Lebanon, vowing Israel will keep responding there, in his words, with force. In other words, even when the headline story pauses, the Lebanon front doesn't. Then there is the West Bank, which has no ceasefire at all to violate, because officially no active war is even supposed to be happening there. And yet, the numbers coming out of that territory this year are staggering. The UN's own humanitarian office recorded at least 35 settler attacks causing casualties or property damage in single week in July. Part of 2026 total already about 1200 incidents across more than 240 Palestinian communities, roughly 6 attacks a day. Israeli police data released shortly after Netanyahu described the violence in a US television interview as the work of, quote, 150 or so juvenile delinquents, showed something very different. A 560% increase in settler violence investigations since 2019, with less than 7% of those cases ever resulting in an actual indictment. Two respected Israeli anti-settlement watchdog groups, Peace Now and Kerem Navot, published a joint report this month documenting what they called de facto annexation happening in real time. 185 new settlement outposts established since 2023, with outposts now controlling nearly a fifth of the entire West Bank. Land seizure orders are accelerating too, with Israeli authorities issuing 49 formal military land seizure orders in just the first half of this year, already surpassing the total for all of 2025 combined. Even a visiting member of the US Congress wasn't exempt from what's happening on the ground. On July 8th, Representative Ro Khanna said he and his delegations were physically blocked and held for over an hour by armed Israeli settlers in the town of Kirbit Zenuta, joined by Israeli soldiers who, in his account, treated the settlers cooperatively rather than intervening on his behalf. If a sitting member of the United States Congress can be stopped like that, it tells you something about what daily life looks like there for Palestinians with no embassy to call. So why is all of this accelerating, especially right now? In the middle of a war, most of the world associates entirely with the US, Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. Because global attention is a finite resource, and right now, nearly all of it is being spent somewhere else. Every time Iran fires on a tanker, every time the US strikes Bandar Abbas or Kharg Island, the news cycle resets around that story specifically. Settlement approvals, land seizure orders, and daily strikes in Gaza and Lebanon simply don't compete for space in that cycle. Even though measured in human cost, they are happening at a rate that will dominate headlines in almost any other week. This isn't a fringe observation. It's the basic mechanic of how attention and oversight work during a multi-front regional conflict. The loudest front absorbs the scrutiny and the quieter fronts get room to move. To be fair to Israel's stated position, its government has been consistent in its own framing throughout. Officials described the continued Gaza operation as necessary to prevent Hamas from rebuilding military capability, and the Lebanon strikes as preemptive action against Hezbollah force they say is actively rearming in violations of the ceasefire's own terms. On the West Bank, Israel maintains the territory's final legal status remains disrupted and subject to future negotiation, and Netanyahu has publicly acknowledged, even while minimizing its scale, that settler violence has become a genuine problem. Whether that framing justifies the scale of what's actually happening on the ground, expanded territorial control beyond agreed lines, a school principal killed in her own car, 49 land seizure orders in 6 months, is exactly the judgment being fought over in capitals, courtrooms, and human rights offices around the world right now. So, what's clear, regardless of where you land on that judgment, is that this region is not experiencing one war right now. It's experiencing at least 4 wars simultaneously in Iran, in Gaza, in Lebanon, and in West Bank. And only one of them is currently commanding the world's attention. The other 3 are advancing largely unwatched, and history suggests that's rarely a coincidence. When the camera eventually do turn back, whatever has been built, seized, or destroyed in the meantime tends to already be treated as the new status quo.